Picture this. You have something you need from God, whether it's a word, a promise He's given you, whether it's a move, it's action you need to take, whether it's a miracle you need. And you're waiting and waiting. And it seems like all you see is setback after setback, disappointment. And then the opportunity presents itself, and everything points to your taking action, and possibly that thing is fulfilled, that breakthrough happens, that miracle, whatever it may be. But how do you know? How can we tell? Is this God's blessing, or is it just a test? Welcome to God Powered. When an opportunity presents itself to you and I, how do we know, is that from the Lord? Could it be that breakthrough we have been hoping for? Could it be that move forward we've been looking for? Or could it just be a test? Could it be a massive setback that looks like an opportunity? How can we tell? Now, I don't have all of the answers, but I have one answer. And we're going to see that today. We're going to look at a story in 1 Samuel 24. And this is a story that so often we just kind of skim over without stopping to really understand a principle and implications that could empower us, help us live that God-powered life. Now, the context is David has been anointed king previously. So we know, what is he looking for? What is he needing God to do for him? We know. What is it you need from the Lord? What is it I need? Whether it's a breakthrough, a miracle at some part of your life, in your family, whatever. Whether it's a promise He's made that you're still waiting to see it happen. Whether it's a dream in your heart you're hoping to see fulfilled. The reality is, you and I, we all have things that we're waiting on that we need from the Lord. And as we're going to see in this story, there can be an overwhelming temptation to, when that opportunity presents itself, to feel like this is where we take action, we help God, and finally get that thing, that breakthrough we've been looking for. Now, in David's life, if you know the story, what's happened? He's been anointed king, and not only does it not look like it's happening, it's gotten worse. Not only has he been waiting and waiting, faced setback after setback, frankly, disappointment, heartbreak. Saul is even trying to kill him. So when we look at the story, there doesn't seem to be any possibility of this actually happening. It seems as remote a possibility as you could find. And then what happens? And now that helps us to understand the pressure to take action. Because what happens? Now, here is the reality of the Bible. There's not a nice way to say it, but this is how real the Bible is. So David and his men are hiding in this cave, and Saul goes in the cave to relieve himself, to use the restroom. This is the opportunity. Saul is right there. David could kill him, take action, fulfill the thing God had already said was going to happen, that he would become king. The temptation and the pressure to take action was so immense, and it gets worse. So, because you and I, there can be that pressure to feel like we need to do something. And we'll come back to that. But as I said, it gets worse. Why? Because his own men pile the pressure on, and they use God's words to do so. So it can all of a sudden become confused, like, yeah, maybe this is God. But what do they say? They say, this is it. He's in your power. They literally say, this is the day the Lord was talking about when He said to you, I will deliver your enemies into your hands to do with them whatever you please. I mean, how much more does it absolutely look like, okay, David, you are supposed to take action. And in doing so, God is going to make you king. Look, literally everything lines up except one thing, which we'll come to. So Saul has walked right into his clutches, so to speak. His men are encouraging him to take action, and they're using God's words to do it. Boy, does that seem like confirmation? Now, David starts to take action, but all he does is cuts the edge off of Saul's robe. But when he does so, now this is what we need to grasp. He's immediately convicted. He immediately feels remorse. Why? Because he realizes he's violating one of God's principles, in spite of everything that appears to be confirmation. He realizes this is violating one of God's principles. And he says, how dare I? How dare I raise a hand against the Lord's anointed? The Lord himself picked him. He made him king. I can't violate that principle. I cannot violate God's principle. Now, if you know the story, Saul leaves. David actually repents. Now, God creates temporary peace between them, which unfortunately, if you know, doesn't last. Now, later on, we'll see where David becomes king. Now, here's the bad news in this particular story. You know, I love a fairy tale where you do the right thing and immediately you get the reward. God does whatever it is we need. But after this, when David proved himself by not violating God's principle, what happened? He still had to wait. But why is this important? See, the challenge becomes when we take action that is not directed by the Lord, even though there might appear to be confirmation, we can face serious setbacks. Now, I'm not saying this would have been the case, because only the Lord knows what he would do. But think about it this way. Saul twice took action contrary to what the Lord wanted him to do. And what was the consequence? Now, God in his mercy let him continue to be king for quite some time, but he's told your family could have been on the throne forever. In other words, the Messiah could have come from his lineage. God actually tells him that. But because he was not a man after God's own heart. See, what David did by not taking matters into his own hands, but continuing to rely on the Lord, he demonstrated that he truly was a man after God's own heart. Now, this is important for you and I, because anything we do, anything we create, whatever we do in our strength, it has no lasting value. God's not glorified, it has no lasting value. And the temptations sometimes can be so great. We live in a world, life would tell you, take that shortcut, grasp that opportunity, don't let it get away, there won't be another chance like this. But the reality is, God has already said, unless I build a house, you labor in vain. God has already said he goes before us. What do we want? We want to see God glorified. We want to see his power released. And yes, we want to be part of the blessing. But when we take action short of his instruction, what happens? God's not glorified, and we create a situation. There's so many instances in the Bible we see where people feeling that need to do something so that promise, that need would be fulfilled, and they derailed themselves. David was a man after God's own heart, not because he was perfect. As we know, he made so many mistakes. But what was it? He truly wanted to follow the Lord. He truly wanted to rely on the Lord. And when he was wrong, he truly repented. Now, again, so picture this. Here's a man who's trying to kill you. Probably is not going to stop. You don't know at that point in the story. And all you've done is cut the corner of his robe. There would be a lot of temptation to just not say a word. You realize, okay, I shouldn't have done that. But David goes further and he repents. He tells his men he's done wrong, and then he tells Saul he's done wrong. We have to learn to rely on the Lord. Now, when he gives us direction, we want to take action. But those opportunities that present themselves, those things that seem to help maybe fulfill what we need God to do in our life, unless the Lord is the one directing them, they have no value. But more importantly, when they violate God's principles, when we are not living God's principles, they absolutely have no power. But when we will live God's principles, then God will fulfill, God will honor, God will do that thing we need for him to do. And in doing so, he will be glorified.